That being said, Max already presented this report, the Brundtland report, which is almost as old as us, published in 1987, and was the first mention of sustainability in an international political context, right? So that was a momentous event where most of the countries started considering the importance of both economic development but also environmental sustainability. And it's called Brundtland, I don't know, maybe a trivia. It's called after a former Prime Minister of Norway. And it was a lady, and she chaired this commission, and this was named in her honor. So it's important to give acknowledgements where acknowledgements are due. Max already showed this, and we've already heard about the weaknesses about this holistic concept of having the environment, social, and economic. This is sustainable. It's all good on paper. And he also talked about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I thought I would show you this instead, because this is, again, another way of graphically representing these Sustainable Development Goals, of how they kind of interact and function together. So we have the basis, which is the biosphere, and we hear a lot of talk about not surpassing planetary boundaries, and we are already doing that. So we have these SDGs 15, 14, 6, and 13. Then we have the society, and this is the core element of sustainable development. And you can see actually, like what Max was pointing to, many of the sustainable development goals are actually societal. So it's in a way very egoistic to think about it, but in a way also very important. Like society is at the core of these things. And on top, and as my counter, is the economy. So it's not on top because it's a hierarchical order, it's on top because it should serve society, and society should fit within the biosphere. So this is kind of a way of having a more integrated view of the Sustainable Development Goals. But of course there are challenges, and Max has already mentioned some of them on the ground. The devil is always in the details, right? These are very broad strategies. How do we actually implement them? How do we do it on the ground? There's also very disparate interpretations and applications of sustainability. What sustainability is for me might not be for Mihai. It might be a different thing for Laura. It might be a different thing for Aurel. And there are very different sustainability concepts or visions proposed mainly by research in policy-making circles and by the private sector. So from this plethora of different avenues for sustainability, I'm going to present you two concepts today. And I think these two are particularly relevant, one's not because we published a book about it, but they are really being actively debated at an international level. There's a lot of funding, know-how, and capacity building put into these. And I think it's also relevant for the more pragmatic people among us, or for those of you working for the corporate sector, that they sort of present the way of thinking about sustainability. So the first one is the circular economy concept. Again, this is not really new. It's kind of new, this strategy, because the Circular Economy Action Plan is part of the European Green Deal. And I think the strategy was published 2 years ago, I believe, by the European Commission. And just to give you an overview of what this is, or again, these are visions, these are plans, strategies, right? So it kind of opposes the linear economic system that we have nowadays, right? You produce something, you use it, and then you throw it away. Because it exerts, this linear model exerts like negative effects on the environment. A circular economy pertains not to do that. It is really redesigning the life cycle of products with the aim to have a minimal input and minimal waste. So this is very important. Like use as much as possible with as little as possible effect on the environment. And from an organizational standpoint, it's a system for achieving net reductions at organizational supply chains and industrial level. So this is really targeted as the industry level, right? And this is a very simple representation of how this could look like. So you have the raw material extraction, it could be agricultural, it could be forest. You have the production design, you have the production and remanufacturing, you have the consumption, and the waste management, and as you see here, the residual waste should be as little as possible. Again, easier said than done, but this is sort of what this strategy expects us to do, or hope that the European community will do. And I think Max already mentioned this before. It's a very this aspect of strong intersectorial dynamics and cooperation, of course, is very important because no business can do it by itself. Moving on to the bioeconomy, the second concept, sustainability avenue, that I want to talk about today. Again, this is a relatively recent strategy. I believe the first one was published in 2012. There was a lot of debates about it, what it is, how it can be implemented, what it means for us, what it means for individual member states. So then they had a reevaluation in 2018, and they published a new bioeconomy strategy, adding in its title, For a Sustainable Europe. So they really re-emphasized the importance of sustainability in the bioeconomy debate. Okay, so what does it mean? What is this bioeconomy? Again, another graphic, the devil's in the details. What I wanted to say, and this is to maybe, I don't know, to massage a bit your nationalistic ego. The bioeconomy is not really new. So the concept was actually coined by a Romanian mathematician, statistician, and economist named Giurcă. He actually changed his name because he moved to the US later on, but he was really considered the father of bioeconomics. And he really envisioned an economy in which we would live within the means of planetary boundaries. You have to understand, this was in the 60s and the 70s, so he was really ahead of his time. And he was actually considered the father of degrowth. So for some of you who are agnostic to this degrowth, community, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the bioeconomy has its roots in the degrowth movement. The newer interpretation, so what I've shown you on the European Commission level and what we're dealing with nowadays, it's really focused on the industrial inputs. So you have these different materials coming from bio-based sectors, forestry, agriculture, fisheries, and whatnot. And again, we're talking to Petronia, right? So its initial intention was to substitute our dependency on fossil-based products. So we are dependent on fossil-based products. We use things out of plastic, we use textiles out of plastic. Initially, the bioeconomy was, how should I say, concocted as a way to sort of reduce our dependencies on these resources. The more we looked into it, and the more we realized that it's impossible at an industrial scale to really substitute everything, we sort of realized, okay, parts of certain products and services can be substituted. Again, research and innovation is core here, because obviously you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but a lot of the products that we use and that we are so accustomed to have to be redesigned and reinvented. And again, because we are talking about trees, and it's really written on the banner at the door, forestry and the forest industry play a fundamental role in providing the bio-based substitutes for this. So again, this might strike a red light for some of you. Or like, oh my God, we don't have enough trees, or oh my God, we have to plant more trees. I believe Paul is going to talk more about that later, but this is just for you to understand the concept. So there is a belief that trees or lignocellulose can actually provide the material basis for many of the products and services that we're using it on a daily basis. It is possible, it has been proven. Of course, we can discuss about this. There are many challenges to this, but this is kind of the core idea of the bio-based economy. And as you can imagine, to make things even more complicated and fun, I have another complex graphic for you. The two concepts actually merge, right? Because if you think about it, bio-based products are kind of circular in a way, right? So if you take material made from a tree, you can use it and then recycle it and bring it back into the system. But the bioeconomy is not necessarily circular per se. The circular economy is not necessarily bio per se. And the circular bioeconomy is not necessarily sustainable per se, right? So always we have to go in it with a critical mind. Here we have an example, because the circular economy doesn't necessarily have to talk about bio-based products. I think Max mentioned Apple, right? We use a lot of these electronics. What happens to your phone after you use it? How often do you change your phone? Does it go back into the system or is it contributing to the wastelands? How much energy is it consuming? So this is this part here. Again, this is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, give credit where credit is due. This is this part here, right? The electronics, the metals, the things that are not bio-based. On the left side, we have products and services that come from renewable biological resources. And this, in a way, are actually more circular. I mean, I hope I'm not sticking my neck out too much, but you can understand a thing made from a tree, right? Logically, is more circular by definition, but not per se. So this is not a truism, but it's a possibility. All right, and now coming back to the forest circular economy, just to give you a kind of like a brief overview of what is possible, and I believe Paul is going to speak much more about this, so I hope I'm not going to take away from your speech, Paul. But forests are the biggest land-based renewable resource, right, in the world. So on paper, we do have forests. As we know, they already perform a classical form of bioeconomy. Like basically, we use timber, pulp and paper, and bioenergy. These are bio-based products. So when you ask foresters, and we've been actually talking to foresters all over Europe, and asking them, hey, what do you think about this bioeconomy? They almost unanimously said, we are bioeconomy. Like German foresters say, we've been doing bioeconomy for 300 years. You think sustainability is modern? We've been doing it since before it was cool. We had Karlovitz, you know? So it's not a really new concept for the foresters per se. What is new is that the sector is going through a major development in diversification. So really going beyond these traditional bio-based products and really producing a lot of new things. And it's increasingly entering new areas. So textiles, we've seen, I'm not sure, Paul, if you're going to talk about it, but the First Lady of Finland famously wore a dress made out of birch. And the birch was harvested from North Karelia in Finland. So it was a very diplomatic way of showing that we support the Finnish forest sector. And look what magic the bioeconomy can do. We can actually wear clothes made out of trees. Construction. We're seeing a boom of wood-based constructions all over Europe. Not only in northern countries, but also in the state where we work, Max, in Baden-Württemberg. There's a lot of this investments in wood-based, multi-story wooden constructions. Chemicals and also intelligent packaging, a lot in Finland is doing incredible strides in that direction. And it's not only about products, right? Because we've heard this before. It's not only about what you can use, ride on or wear. It's also about these services, I think, that Laura was also talking about, ecosystem services, recreational services, cultural services, right? In a country like Romania, they're very important. And we still haven't found a way to integrate these properly into this bioeconomy concept, or at least into the forest-based bioeconomy concept. So there's still a lot of conceptual work, and this is where you need guys like us to sort of think up how we could do this realistically. And again, I believe this is the last graphic. This is how it would look for the forest-based sector specifically, how this concept of a circular forest-based bioeconomy would look like. So again, you have the sustainable sourcing, trees from the forest. You already can use residues and waste here in products design and in different factories. Part of it can go to bioenergy and biofuels. Out of this, you can make different bio-based products, foods and feed. I've learned that in France, for example, they feed lignin-based I believe, food to chickens. So that was interesting. Again, the concept of prolonged and shared use, and then you have energy recovery and composting. Part of it would go to biofuels. The other part would actually go to the forest as a nutrient, or as ash, right? So this is from a scientific study from Stigma and colleagues from a couple of years ago. So a lot of people who are smarter than me have actually looked at the numbers and how this could be done, and they've come up with a proposal, not a solution, because there is no silver bullet to all these problems. But, because I tend to be very critical, and I think you should be as well, you shouldn't accept all these truths as a given. You should be very critical and very skeptical of them. Because, as I said, there is no silver bullet to sustainability, and the devil is always in the details. And some critiques, and I'm sure many of you have them, to this circular bioeconomy concept are: there's limited understanding of the substitution effects on the level of markets, different countries, and global regions, right? Because if you talk about we're going to substitute everything fossil-based with timber, where's the wood going to come from? Who's going to provide it? Who's going to manufacture it? What is it going to mean for the country who provides them? What does it mean for their markets, for the economy? So we still have a lot of complicated questions to answer here. Then, as I said, bio-based innovations are not sustainable per se. They might even conflict with some sustainable development goals and cause negative trade-offs, right? If we just, for example, the fashion is a good example, right? We produce more clothes out of wood textiles. So what? How does that solve the problem? How does that solve the problem of energy consumption, of water consumption, of fast fashion, of the mountains of clothes being discarded somewhere in the Antarctic, or I don't know where they throw clothes away? We're still keeping the same systemic thinking without really changing the root of the problem. Again, the innovation discussion in bioeconomy, because everybody likes to talk about bioeconomy and talks about new products. But maybe this innovation needs to go beyond material needs and raise important questions, and I think Laura addressed that partially, about human survival, social justice, human rights. We've been hearing a lot of discussions about social innovations, right? Should these innovations be made by big, wealthy companies, or could individuals or small communities also contribute with innovations to this bio-based economy? And if so, how to integrate them? And last but not least, and maybe bringing it back to Georgescu-Robi's thinking, there's really this mantra in the forest sector: you have to innovate or perish, innovate or perish, innovate or perish. Everything's going to go to hell if you don't innovate. But what if there are other avenues for exploring innovation? What if there are other avenues of reaching a more sustainable way of living, which do not necessarily have economic growth as an end goal? So what if we talk about sufficiency instead? What if we talk about innovations and products that actually satisfy our needs instead of growing the economy incessantly? And when does this economic plane of incessant growth land? When does it land? Until when can we grow? These are just some food for thought. Again, maybe a bit critical. What do we actually do? Because you're going to say, like, Alex, put your money where your mouth is. What do you actually do? If you're going to complain about this stuff, I'm just going to jump about it. We're still working on it, so this is just a recent, where's Paul? We've been working recently on sort of showing how this circular bioeconomy might look for the Romanian forest-based sector specifically. And you can see here we've put societal well-being at its core. So really trying to integrate all these elements with the know-how, social capital that we already have here. And really, I believe Max was talking about, is really try to contextualize it to local needs and not simply blindly adapt directives that are, one size fits all, right? So we're thinking about this is upcoming, and we're looking forward to having interesting discussions with you about how this could be achieved. And of course, a bit of shameless promotion. You've all learned how to use this book to vote. I would encourage you to also open it, look inside. It might be technical in some parts, but in other parts not, so we're looking for feedback. We're also trying to translate it. And we've also started this little initiative, which is called the Romania Bioeconomy Alliance. So far, it's a web page. But we're really hoping to grow this community with experts and enthusiastic people such as yourselves. And Marin and Mihai are helping us with that. So please feel free to contact us and help us develop a bioeconomy that really fits the needs and wants of the Romanian people and the European community, after all. Okay, that being said, thank you for your attention.